And we are live. Welcome to this latest episode of Totally Unscripted. I'm Martin Hoxie, and as ever, I'm joined by Charles. Hello, Charles.
Hey, Martin. Hello, everybody listening in.
So we should say from the outset, so we're missing one of our other regular co-hosts, Steve Webster. So Steve is unfortunately unwell today, so we're sending our wishes to Steve and a speedy recovery. But let's not delay getting on to the show. So this is, I think, actually going to be a really educational experience, particularly for me, Charles. So I'm looking forward to learning quite a lot. So today we're going to be talking about getting amped about email. So Charles, tell me what we should be getting amped about.
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully the title attracted some people to come take a look at this episode because let's be honest, email is traditionally not sexy or flashy. It's actually quite boring and kind of quite a utility that we've used for a long period of time. And hasn't really evolved over the years as many technologies have. And so what we're about to hear from John and Steve is how you actually can take email to the next level by making it funner, interactive, interesting, flow within your business processes, bring an experience to the user that's unlike anything email's seen before. It shouldn't be this plain HTML or static content that sits there. It should do something. It should connect to other systems. And AMP really allows you to do that. And I've played a lot with that myself. And I think the use cases are super stunning. But with no further ado, why don't we bring in John and Steve and let's get amped ourselves.
Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Charles and Martin.
Hey. So quick introductions. If you may, John, you are the product manager of not just AMP for email, but also other things. Real quickly, you want to just introduce yourself, and then Steve, obviously, the folks know you, but if you want to just jump in and tell us what you do with AMP, that'd be awesome.
So yeah, I'm a product manager for AMP for email on the Gmail team, as well as for the add-on ecosystem across all of Google Workspace. I sort of focus on how people can integrate things into Gmail overall.
Awesome.
And I'm Steve Basil, and I'm a developer programs engineer, one of probably many titles now. And yeah, I started playing with AMP. So it was last year for Next. We built that showcase video. Yeah, it was helping out with the AMP stuff, and it's actually really cool stuff. And just lately I've been starting to work with some more developers on it and learning more about it myself. And yeah, I think it's a neat technology that has a lot of potential, especially for enterprise applications and transactional emails. But John's going to go into all that, hopefully. So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to steal his thunder.
One of the great things is, first of all, I think it's been kind of a quiet secret. And John, I think it was originally geared for email providers, people who produce a lot of mail. But as Steve mentioned, it's starting to evolve into other use cases, whether it's part of a workflow or enterprise scenarios. And why don't you give us the rundown on what it is and take us through it and share the goodies with us?
Sure, absolutely. A little history lesson first that you hinted at, Charles. Email has been around like a long time. We use it for a lot of interesting things, making plans with friends, promotions, whatever, unbelievable number of social media notifications, things like that, right? In fact, 2.6 billion Google Workspace users every month, and 293 billion emails sent in 2019 are pretty staggering numbers. I feel like I get a vast majority of those 293 billion emails in my inbox. And over that same time period since email was invented, like we've evolved the web incredibly significantly. Nobody would think in the early 2000s that we could run a spreadsheet application or this, StreamYard magical live streaming video extravaganza inside of a browser, but that's what we're doing. All over that time, email hasn't really changed. You can send text, images, and links inside of an email. The content's static and it gets out of date. You can't like click on it and do fun things with it like you can the rest of the web. So it's like really strange. Email is important to people. Billions of people use it, and it hasn't evolved much. So history lesson over. That's why we made AMP for email. It's an evolution of the AMP standard that allows you to really make your emails more interactive and interesting. It's a big deal that we've done this, or at least we think it is. I'm massively biased since it's my job and all. But it makes emails more interactive, so you can do things like clicking around in interfaces, taking actions. It can keep them up to date so that you don't see old stuff if things have changed. And we'll talk about some specific use cases in a minute. And then like taking actions right there without opening up a new tab, not going anywhere else. And then it's super important to note that AMP is an additive thing to the email standard. It is not a replacement. So it's just a third MIME type that goes inside of the email body alongside the text and HTML parts. So all good things. What can you do? There are a number of components. First few I call marketing components. They're look and feel things, carousel, accordion, sidebar. And I'll show you some examples in a minute, but they're just different ways to display content. Where it gets super interesting to me, at least, is this dynamic AMP data. So AMP bind, AMP list, and AMP form. That's what allows that rich interactivity, keeping content up to date, stuff like that. And then there's another time ago widget, which is I'm kind of interested.
Hey, John, so this is a great point I wanted to ask you a question on. So AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, it's a pretty large spec for building websites and really fast mobile sites.
That's right.
What portion or how does AMP for email use that? I mean, is it a one-for-one? Are there things that are missing? Is it a derivative? Like, go into some details about if someone already knows AMP, what's the email?
Great question. Yeah. So it is a derivative. It is a subset of the overall AMP standard. So there are certain AMP components that we allow, largely the ones you see here. There's more information on all the specific AMP components and how they work inside of email. If you go to amp.dev/about/email, that will show you all the documentation. You can figure out exactly what is supported. But the really interesting parts are bind, list, and form.
Yeah, and I think it's really good to point out because obviously, we want to build very interactive dynamic sites, but we also need to maintain the safety and frankly, the sanctity of emails. And obviously the AMP for email spec is focused on that.
Yeah, for sure. I see a comment has come in around ways to watch video inside of Gmail. That's a great question. And the answer is you can't really do it. Because of the way we've implemented AMP, for security and privacy reasons, we proxy all of the content. And so being able to watch a video inside of Gmail would mean that we would have to proxy that entire video stream. And that's more infrastructure than it's worth.
That's pull up.
The diplomatic way of saying it.
Kind of hoping we could put the show through it, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll just do the entire show inside of an email. That'd be
oh no, that'd be so awesome. Oh, please,
I mean, there's some cool factor there, but yeah. And then there was another question I wanted to answer. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, will Google Forms automatically incorporate AMP superpowers? If I can convince the form team to build that out, yes. So that's, it's an internal thing we need to do. But I think having having Google Forms work inside of an AMP email would be a natural extension, like we do with some of the examples I'll show you in a minute.
That'll be awesome. Keep those ideas coming. Yeah, awesome.
Absolutely. We love those. So when should you use AMP email? You can use it whenever you want to, absolutely. But generally when it's things that are like transactional, like receipts, delivery notices, anything that may change over time, anything you want to reduce friction on, so like surveys or whatever, if I want to make that user take action inside the email, much higher response rates when you bake that content, interactive content into the message. And then, as I already said, the changing content bits, right? So if it's delivery status, it's shipped, it's in this place, like you can imagine the UPS delivery notification case. We have an e-commerce provider that's done that I'll show you as well. So
I got a question for you. So some of those use cases, like quick actions and everything, there's another not entirely well-known Gmail surface area for quick actions. I'm not sure what we're calling them these days. Used to call them, used to be Smart Mail, and had a few different monikers of doing metadata. And how do you steer people to the right path? Like, a quick action that appears just in the summary versus something in the body of a message.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth testing both if your quick action is literally one button. If you don't need a ton of context to the thing, then putting it in the smart action so you see it in the thread list and like you can RSVP to calendar invites. I don't need a ton of context. I see that I am available and accept the meeting. But if I need to like approve an invoice or somebody's expense report or something, I would probably want to see the expense report. So making it an AMP email makes more sense in that case. Or if it's important that the content could change multiple ways. So like there's 3 steps in this workflow. Or something more advanced of an interaction than just a single click, then obviously AMP for email works better. There's no reason they can't work together.
That's true, right? Yeah, you could have approve in the summary, but then still be able to drill in and get that context. Yeah.
My manager probably would use the approve in the summary more often than not. Without the context. So,
it's good to know.
he trusts me. So when you build HTML emails, there's a lot of variability and trickiness, especially as you start getting more creative and advanced. Not all clients handle all of it the same. That's one of the great things about AMP for email is it is a standard that should render the same in all clients that support it. So AMP works with HTML CSS. Everything should feel relatively normal except for the AMP components. No need for the hacks. There's people who made their entire careers and companies that have made their entire reason for existence on email hacks and trying to make all that stuff happen. We're trying to make it easier for you to get that set of interactivity and to have it be universally viewable.
So if you're sending emails today, you're writing HTML and you're actually pushing that through to actually make it enabled, interactive, dynamic AMP email, it's a pretty small, subtle change, isn't it, in a lot of ways?
It should be a relatively straightforward set of changes. There's a company we've done a webinar with before called Skipify that will take an HTML email and convert it over for an e-commerce customer to AMP. There's plenty of people, like a handful of people, I should say, that do builders so that you don't have to think about the code. But look, if you look here, this is the code for a carousel. Relatively straightforward, not that hard.
So it looks like HTML with a few extra tags.
Yeah, so you'll see the AMP carousel tag is different. You'll see all that script stuff. So you have to include those scripts. So you can't include other scripts outside of the AMP stuff. It won't validate. And we'll talk about the validator and the AMP playground in a bit. I think we will in a bit. But yeah, it's
just
easy.
A question coming from Nicholas as well. So I'm guessing, but from what you're saying, that you can use a combination of AMP and obviously HTML.
Even better than that, Nicholas, you have to use both. So you have, if you're going to send an AMP email, there's HTML and CSS in that AMP email. We don't allow all of the same CSS that's allowed in an HTML email. Although, again, it depends on which client you're talking about, what they allow. But you have to have an HTML part and an AMP part because there's a bunch of reasons that an AMP email could fall back to HTML. Like if I'm a Gmail user and I happen to have an iPhone using Apple Mail on my iPhone, Apple Mail on the iPhone doesn't support AMP for email, so you have to have HTML fallback. If there's some sort of connectivity, if you have a callback to the server and there's some connectivity problem, it'll fall back. There's a variety of things that could make an AMP email fall back to HTML. So make sure you have a really good, solid HTML fallback so that you can get all the coverage. And if you don't, it'll not render.
Right.
So carousel example. Again, this is just a marketing example. You see the thing just slides as you would expect a carousel to do.
But in your email.
Exactly. Before I jump into the use cases stuff, let me just scan through the questions, see if there's anything else really quickly.
Yeah, here's one I got. I'll read it out for you from Sarah. So, like email markup, does AMP for email require approval by Google?
Yes, and AMP for email is not just a Google thing. I think I have a slide on this later. AMP for email is supported by Google, Yahoo, and Mail.ru, and AOL.com is coming soon. And so we have a registration process. You register each from address that you're sending from, and the email is then reviewed. And once you have sent a working production quality AMP email, we review it, and you are successfully registered and added to the allow list. Then you can begin sending to.
Let me ask you a question on that. If I wanted to use AMP for email for an internal domain solution only, do I still have to register it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What about my developer experience?
So for developers, you can allow list a from address from the playground, so that you can do your testing.
Awesome.
Or I guess in theory, in a domain experience, you could allow list no reply at mycompany.com or whatever, and have each individual email user allow list that. But I wouldn't recommend it.
Would there possibly be any capability in the future where we could do a domain centric, or is it always going to be kind of public, or you must register for all no matter what the use case is? I'm asking for a feature for a friend, by the way.
Asking for a friend. In an ideal world, there would not need to be a registration process whatsoever, and this would just be how email works. That ideal world is not as close to reality as I would like it to be. And so we're exploring various, for lack of a better term, half measures to get us closer to that in the near term. But in general, it's more oriented towards the broad mass marketing email things, or mass productivity type cases, where a specific individual company still probably needs to go ahead and get the registration process done.
Makes sense. Okay, why don't you show us some examples?
Oh, sure.
Just perhaps before that, Neil's question about, so you've talked about developers whitelisting email addresses. So in terms, I'm guessing what Neil's getting at is users signing up so that they can receive AMP email, or is this?
I'm not entirely. I think Neil might need to restate the question because I'm not entirely certain what he's asking. Because you have to have signed into your Gmail account, and then when you do, you will be able to see AMP emails. So I think that there's something else he's asking that I'm not sure what it is.
Okay.
So I will quickly burn through some examples. So there's, I'll start with the marketing examples. There's Pinterest, allows you to scroll through and see lots of cool stuff. But then more importantly, you can take action right inside that message and just pin the thing without having to open a new tab. A Lending Tree did one where it's like a loan calculator, where you go and answer a number of questions. And, are you a homeowner? What's your financial goal? Blah, blah, blah. And then they recommend a specific loan for you. They saw increased loan applications with that, which is great. So Equid, I led the witness a little earlier with this one. This is an e-commerce platform provider. So they're like Shopify or BigCommerce. They allow you to build an e-commerce store of your own. And so here you see a catalog use case with things like the carousel and a bunch of different interactions happening there. So that's cool looking. They have an email verification when you sign up to create a store yourself. You obviously have to confirm your email because they're trying to reduce bad actors as well. So this one, you confirm, and then next time you come into this email, it just is that sign into the control panel email. So this is that button. So it's still a useful email. This is the real-time order status that I was talking about. So it calls back to the server and says where in the pipeline is the thing. And then they implemented for some of their subset of their customers in a higher paid tier this abandoned cart email powered by AMP, which is basically just a catalog thing, but only for the thing you left in your cart. When they implemented that, on average, their merchants saw an increase of 82% in sales from the abandoned cart, and one of them had a over 300% increase in sales.
Yeah, that's
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's seriously insane. And you can read that there's a link at the bottom. You can read that success story.
It's not just dynamic email; it's better email, right? I mean, it actually helps the business model work much smoother.
Absolutely does.
The one thing I could see in the e-commerce scenario is, imagine a product is backordered or out of catalog. It's dynamic, right? It doesn't show as something you can buy if you want to actually extract that and say it's not available. And it really just makes that whole experience a lot better for the person.
Yeah, or inventory is getting low and you want to promote something else as the premier thing, change content on the fly. Oyo travel booking site back when people used to travel to places.
Hmm.
Those were the good old days, huh?
That's
Someday.
It's a pretty robust. Yeah, one day again. It's a pretty robust set of interactions, right? You can carousel through, find a specific place, and get more details about it. When they launched this, 57% increase in click-throughs and 60% higher conversions. Obviously, conversions equals dollars. That's better. I think this is the final. Maybe I have one more. Loan calculator. So you can see every time they click anything, all the numbers change immediately. Everything's baked right into this email. This one doesn't even make calls back to the server. And when they implemented that, they saw their click-through rates more than double. So that's pretty epic. So those are all like marketing things. And that's why I went through them much more quickly, because I think the interesting stuff is what I'm about to talk about. Unless you want to stop me and ask questions, Josh.
No, that's awesome. Show us these.
Okay, cool. So the one that most people are probably aware of if they're Google Workspace, Gmail type users is this Google Docs comment. So whenever somebody tags you in a document, it sends you an email. When you see that little bit of context, it used to be you'd have to click on that, open a new tab, and it hopefully would take you to the right spot in the doc. Now you can just respond directly in that message. And if somebody else has made comments since that message was sent to you, you'll see that updated stuff too. So very frequently you just open that message, see that the problem is taken care of, and move on with your life without having to do anything.
Love that feature, by the way.
It's hugely popular, high customer satisfaction rates. Like it's strong.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously the interaction increases from the e-commerce solutions. I've heard some numbers about just the number of people commenting on documents is higher. Do you have a stat or something you can share? I mean, because I don't have an externally shareable somewhere else to comment on a document, I'm less likely to do it. And this workflow just streamlines right through my inbox, which it's an amazing increase of performance or productivity.
Yeah, some of the non-Google senders have some stats that I'll share in a second around that same set of use cases. We didn't ever get Google grouped numbers.
That'd be interesting.
Big company problems. This other one that's been playing, I guess we took it off screen, but this next one here is granting access to files. So when somebody, accesses a file that has restricted permissions on it, used to be kind of a pain to approve those permissions. Now it happens right inside the message. Same kinds of ideas there, right? Choose your level, maybe send a message and just hit share. It just works. Another one that's launching soon, Zapier, allows you to replay some held tasks. So you see the before message, which would take you to viewing the task. And now on the right side, you just hit replay and boom, it replays right inside the email. Dispatch is like a tool for building emails. And so they have a bunch of these interesting templates. So this one is an event survey. So you see, enter some answers to some survey questions, hit submit, and you get a thank you. Similar idea with a product review. You purchase something, this template comes out that says, give me a rating and a review. I wait patiently because I'm talking too fast for the animation to complete. And ultimately, you'll see the person hit the submit review button, and success happens inside the tab. As you can imagine, when you implement something like this, like the response rates are way higher because it just feels more natural and integrated, and you don't pop out to somewhere else, which is where fall off happens all the time. And then the crazy thing that they did is this is a chat client built inside of an email. So it's a little bit of a hack in that you have to hit the little refresh button if you want to see comments that have come from the other side. But the fact that they did this at all, I think, is amazing. Vogsy is a professional services automation solution, and they built this sort of, I was hinting at this one earlier, the invoice approval kind of a thing. So they could absolutely put the accept button into the subject line, but more likely you're going to want to have a little more context. Click on the document to see it and then approve. Real quick, they improved, their customers improved approval times from like 24 hours to less than 4 when they implemented that. So that was helpful. Guru's knowledge management system. So how do you make sure that everybody in your company knows all the right things? They launched this experience that you see here, way more visually interesting and useful for verifying sort of knowledge cards that they have. 2.5 time increase in card comments, 75% increase in card verifications. So hugely successful, useful cases for them. And I left one out, which is we'll show people later. It's fine.
So first of all, those were awesome, and actually they're all very pretty as well too. I mean, nicely designed CSS around it as well too. I think is impressive. But basically, anybody that has an interactive email workflow, right? I need to get response. I need to share information in real time.
Yeah.
They're a candidate for building an AMP for email to actually, as you said, almost every single use case or every use case, it's a better experience. They get higher pickup numbers. They have more interactivity. They have people completing tasks.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you're sending email that requires an action, AMP has a business value.
Absolutely. Well, there's another company called Skipify that does that I mentioned earlier that works with e-commerce senders, and they built the entire cart shopping experience inside of a message, so you can choose like colors and sizes, add to cart a number of items, and then view your cart, and then one-click purchase right from the message. The one-click does take you out to a confirmation page in case you want to cancel or change your mind. But yeah, other than that, the entire thing is baked inside of an email for the full shopping experience. It's pretty amazing.
So let me play the devil's advocate for a second. This has been out for about a year-ish.
A little more, yeah.
And it seems like it's a best kept secret. Not a lot of folks doing it. Is it because it's hard? Is it because it's not discovered? What's the reason we haven't seen more of it? And I know you're going to segue in a second to show us some third parties that actually can help you build these. But what's the steps to get people thinking about this more, or what would you encourage people to do to dig in to actually learning how to actually just improve their email experience for their users?
Yeah. Let me burn through these slides and then answer that question at the end, because
that's fair.
It lays the groundwork. Yeah.
Good.
So like there's a bunch of parts to the answer. There's a bunch of parts to sending emails today. And in order for this to work, it has to work with all the parts. So on the delivery side, you have to have an ESP that supports AMP for email. Otherwise, it cannot be delivered to anyone. And so we've been working really hard to increase the number and the quality of those ESPs. As you can see, there's some big names on here. Salesforce Marketing Cloud has pre-announced support for that. It should be happening early this year. SendGrid, Adobe, Braze, like SparkPost, like people that you use are in here. There's a bunch of others that aren't on this list, but on the screen, but you can look at them on amp.dev. If the ESP that you're using doesn't support AMP for email, what we want you to do is ask them to support it. Because the reason that some of these have started supporting it is because their customers asked for it. It's not good enough for Google to ask them to do it. It turns out they want their customers who pay them money to ask them for these things. On the rest of the ecosystem side, like it works in Gmail, Mail.ru, Yahoo Mail, as I mentioned. AOL is coming soon. If you're doing testing, it works in Litmus and NodeMailer and Email and Acid, which isn't on here. And there's a bunch of people that'll help you build these things if you don't want to do that coding yourself. And then I'll skip this one. It's really cool. So then, if you want to do it, first of all, go check out the documentation, make sure ESP supports it, and then you can play around in the playground and amp.gmail.dev/playground or the AMP playground on amp.dev. I know those are confusing URLs. Playground.amp.dev/question runtime equals AMP for email. It's two different playgrounds. They do essentially very similar things, I should say. I find the Gmail one easier for sending myself test things to my Gmail address, and the AMP one has some other bells and whistles to it. But that's the way to start playing around, see what it's going to look like. Try some stuff out. There are some templates in there that you can then modify. And then once you have something working, then you have to go through this registration process, which we also hinted at earlier, which is another one of the reasons why there's a bit of a barrier to adoption, is because there is a registration process. And we reject the vast majority of the registrations that come through because they're just broken and wrong. They don't include an HTML fallback, or they have code in there that wouldn't pass through the validator. Like, they don't render, like various reasons. So we're trying to keep the quality high at the beginning of this process. We're trying to avoid spam phishing, bad actors, And so that's why there's this friction in the getting going process. But over time, we hope to reduce this friction and make it easier for people to send, for sure. I think that's all. Yeah, a bunch of links, blah blah blah.
Leave it up for a while so folks can see the different places to go and learn more about it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So John, question for you. Building is great. As far as like enterprise control and managing that, what about on the workspace admin side? What do they have to do to enable this or not enable this, or can they whitelist certain ones, or what's kind of if an admin's watching today and wants to know how do I allow this?
Great question. The admin controls and the user controls are relatively similar.
I think John, we're back.
I mean, can you hear me?
You froze for a second, but I think you're back.
Okay, I like being back. Admin controls and user controls are relatively similar. You have to allow images to be displayed for AMP to render, and then there's another checkbox for allow dynamic mail at all. And so if you don't have those enabled, then you won't be able to see it, and it'll just fall back to HTML.
Awesome. Hey, pivot for a second, Steve. I know you've built some of these and you've played with it, and obviously you have an extensive, at least a historical background in HTML and CSS. What was your experience like? What would you tell folks to do to get started? What's your guidance?
It's a little bit of an iceberg. I think there's the getting starting experience is actually really good. The playground is awesome. There's the two playgrounds are great. They give you instant feedback. Live previews of everything you're doing, and for me, I tend to build most things I build are React, right? But if you use Angular or anything like that, or Polymer, like the model for AMP is not that much different than any other modern framework for building UIs. So like I didn't find the learning curve that bad on just doing interactivity. Where I think like where it starts to get tricky is AMP is a little bit more restrictive in layouts and dynamic resizing and things like that. And so there's like a bunch of little hacks you have to do and things like that to get the really, really nice layouts. And then there's as you get deeper, there's more and more and more. John, I think you were talking about some of the testing tools and thinking about analytics, right? Like your click-through metrics are going to change and how you track that, right? And that's something that if you're not thinking about, you could be in for a surprise, right? You launch this thing and you're like, hey, our engagement's way down. It's like, well, no, your engagement is actually up. You're just not tracking, the same things.
If the Google Docs team had measured the success of those emails on how many people go and view Google Docs or time spent in Google Docs or one of those things, like time spent on the website, they would have considered a massive failure because people don't go to Google Docs as much because of this, right? They get the thing done inside the message and move on with their lives. So you have to be careful what you are measuring. Make sure you're measuring what matters. That's why some of those, like I talked about click-through rates, but then the more important metrics were things where revenue went up or conversions went up, right? That's make sure you know what the metrics that matter are for you, for your business, and measure those. And don't necessarily count on those things that are generally leading metrics if you can avoid it. So,
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I'm a big user now of the share permissions in a document right inside of email. And that's a super hard one to figure out how much time I'm actually sending. I will tell you my click-through or my completing the task has gone way up, right? I'll do it immediately. You don't have to think about it, where you may be waiting 2 days or asking me twice for it. Now I'm like right there. And that's hard to capture, but I couldn't imagine going back and using the old version either. So, obviously exponentially it's changed my workflow. I can imagine that on 2 billion users, it's probably pretty big as well too. I do have another question though. I mean, John, you hammered home pretty good, have an HTML fallback. Obviously not every single client in the world is going to support this. So you need plan B. Yep. Also, another thing, these are dynamic mails that are living, breathing, actually kind of phoning home to get live data and bring it back. There's a time period when they actually expire and they're no longer dynamic. Can you go into some of the, first of all, talk about that and then talk about the kind of the reasoning and the best practice around it?
Yeah, for sure. So after 30 days, an AMP email will fall back to HTML inside of Gmail. Largely because we didn't want senders to have to keep up infrastructure for old things. So like I send an email campaign out with some survey, like I don't want to have that have to keep that infrastructure up for 2 years just because maybe somebody's going to keep opening that email for some reason.
Right.
And there's plenty of stats that show that if it's older than 30 days, it's the likelihood that somebody was going to do something interesting with it is way, way, way lower. So it shouldn't be too much of a problem, but it is a limitation.
Yeah, I pretty much declare bankruptcy for anything that's over 30 days, and just if it's important, they're going to resend it. So
yeah, if I haven't responded to you in a month, you should ask again.
Absolutely.
I suppose perhaps a question for Steve. A lot of our viewers are AppScript developers. Is it possible to start making AMP emails with AppScript, or is the infrastructure just not going to be there for that?
That's a really good question, and I have no idea. It's just not something I tried.
Well, we've got our homework for the show, folks.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing the answer is probably no. Just given how how things are whitelisted, just because they're there's because it's otherwise you're like the whole whitelisting process goes out the door when you put make that a feature in AppScript to be able to send this content right to anyone, right? Then like what does that approval process look like? And my hunch is it's not going to work. I don't know. Yeah, but we don't.
Well, you bring up.
I don't know.
It's an interesting question. I mean, we all know, and we kind of joke a little bit. There's 1,300 different mail merge tools written on AppScript, and we know people are writing even more as we speak. Isn't there a way of actually having your payload be AMP versus your payload being straight HTML, and why not? And John, do you know of anybody who's got a mail merge type tool in the market or coming out with one that may use AMP as a feature?
Not that I'm aware of. In the add-ons, mail merge add-ons space, like conceptually what you're doing is then sending that as yourself. And so the firm address would be you. Sure. We don't approve individual senders in that way. So that wouldn't work today.
Got it.
But in the land where it's just part of how email works, absolutely you could build stuff like that.
Makes sense.
And just looking at the Gmail app and everything, and it doesn't look like it's going to allow you to send, attach a third body type.
No.
So I think the answer for AppScript is just not at this time.
Put in the feature request, people.
Yeah, an interesting use case could be calendar availability too. But again, it would have to come from a central address. But it could be the same thing that the Google Docs does, where we sort of friendly name it as Steve Basil has sent you a thing. It actually comes from no reply at docs.google.com or whatever it is. So it could come from mycalendarsoftware.com. I think Doodle even had one for a bit, although I haven't seen it recently. So I think that's another really good use case.
Well, I think a great use case, you've probably seen this where folks mail out their calendars.
Yeah, exactly.
Pick off the time they want, and that
Exactly.
mail automatically just shows the ones disappear that are no longer available.
Yep.
I mean, that's a great use case, which actually, let me do this. I'm going to ask John, and Steve, jump in as well. John, you built this. Obviously, you're the builder of the tool. But if folks listening, what would be the one idea? What's the one classic canonical use case you would love to see somebody build and take to market, or build a solution around? Like, what would you like to see someone dream up and build?
The things I start getting excited about are when people build mini apps inside of the email, like really doing something useful and productive, and keeping people like engaged inside that message, letting them do the thing and move on with their lives. That's where it gets exciting. So again, the calendar thing works. Subscription preferences widget at the bottom for bulk senders would be an interesting one. Obviously, things like surveys make a ton of sense. But I like when people can like get worked at, like that Zapier one where you can replay tasks. That gets me excited. If I was able to respond to things like a Jira ticket or a GitHub pull request or some of those kinds of things, those are very interesting cases to me.
Nice.
Yeah, as a developer, it's the issue trackers and GitHub, things like that. Those were the ones where because I respond to those emails all the time, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Right.
click, open a window, wait for it to load, scroll down, right?
Fine.
And it's not that long. I mean, it's 10 seconds, but 10 seconds 50 times a day, 5 days a week, it adds up. And then for millions of people, it's changed the world.
Given Google is quite a big EDU marketplace as well, I could see how a lot of educators would be getting really interested into sending emails to students, and they're just clicking buttons to for quizzes or things like that, or even grading stuff from within your email.
Those would be super cool.
Yeah, what I'm actually really curious about, this has nothing to do with enterprise use cases, but there's actually an email-based poker tournament that runs every year. And
fascinating.
Yeah, it is. But that is like a perfect case, right? Where it's like, I want, because it said every time there's an action, right? In the game, it sends you a new email, and then you have to kind of piece together the history. But to have that just render, hey, here's the status of things, and it's live updated all the time is actually super cool. And I think it's all open source, so I think I have a project now.
We have a couple of questions inside from Sorab that I would love to answer. If you want to pull up one of those, I'll answer whichever order you pull them up in, Martin.
There we go.
Cool. Does AMP help with not having emails land in spam at all? Only in such that it increases the interaction rates and the usefulness of those emails, and people mark them as spam less frequently, then it absolutely would. But you can't have a crappy experience and then just AMP power your crappy experience and hope it does better. And then the next one was, can payment processes also be integrated inside emails using AMP? Not really.
So I think you mentioned that shopping experience one.
Yeah. So the way that Skipify does it is you basically already have an account with Skipify. So think about it like an Amazon one-click. You can't Amazon one-click if they don't have your credit card and they don't have your shipping address and they don't have all this information about you previously. And so that's the same concept with the Skipify thing. It's just, there's some validation that you are actually you, using tokens, access tokens. And then everything else exists on their platform. They deal with payment, they deal with all that stuff. And never is that passing through the email itself. Just your intent to buy is the thing that passes through the email. Yeah.
I think if you already have saved payment info, it's, shouldn't be a problem. Right. I mean, as a user, I don't know if I would want to put my credit card number in an email, but
I don't want you to put your credit card number in my emails. Yeah. So please don't.
I wouldn't mind if you did and send it to me, but that's okay.
Speaking of and send it to me, that's the other thing. One of the other security features of AMP for email is if you forward an AMP email, it strips off the AMP part. So any sort of tokens, any special stuff that's in there that is unique to that user goes away if somebody forwards it to you.
Yeah, which is important because I mean, the way AMP works for the audience is everything is proxied and anonymized. So the only way that you can have user identity is that information has to be encoded into the email at send time. Usually like a JOT or something like that, so a JSON web token, something that securely identifies the user and is signed and so on. So you definitely don't want that content to be forwardable. Otherwise, anyone you forward is going to be acting as you, right? And it's like
so the same experience. If I email this to a group and not an individual, I get the HTML rollback.
What happens when an AMP email flows out of a group?
That's a good question. I think I got to try that.
Test use case.
It probably works. I don't know. It probably works, but the authentication wouldn't work, right? Because it's not a bunch of individual bits.
Right. Okay.
Well, it would be acting as
whoever's one authentication thing.
Whatever it's bound to. It's at some time. Yeah.
I think it might fall back to HTML, but I'm not entirely certain because of the mechanism of group sends, but I'm not sure.
Well, we have a test opportunity.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. Let me phrase that question in a different way, John. Is there any scenario, is there a sweet spot? Is there anything maybe too complex you'd say avoid, or too simplistic that it may not be worth the effort to actually produce the email? I mean, when do you know you've got a use case right? Like, what's the sweet spot?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think there is something too simplistic. If you think back to that carousel example that the Nest team sent out for back to school, it was literally just pictures in a carousel. I mean, that's relatively straightforward, very simple, no magic to it. Just looked better and worked better inside of email because of the AMP, and that had better results. So like, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything too simple.
Okay.
Too complex. I mean, you're limited to 200K of markup for the AMP part. So
that's a lot.
Over that,
you can do a lot. 200K.
You can build an entire shopping cart, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, I found building them myself, my biggest limitation was my design skills and my CSS skills. Making them work was one thing. Making them look good was harder. That's why I love that partners have actually built templates and models and actually will help you do that yourself. But for me, it's been a while since I made good-looking web pages. And that's where I found that was my biggest limitation, is how do I get over that hurdle? Because I felt like I was hand-rolling a lot of CSS and learning things I learned 10 years ago and subsequently forgot on purpose. And so I'm glad to see partners making it easier, making it accessible.
So you remembered why you forgot them.
So talking about the partners or the people who have done it and have these really great metrics, do you have any sense of how much their investment was? Right? Were these 2-week-long engineering efforts, or when you start throwing in user testing, were they looking at a quarter? Like what's that ROI? What's the investment part? Yeah,
some of those cases were in the very beginning phases of AMP for email, before we had like good documentation and stuff like that. Yeah, their investment was obviously much higher. They were working through the problems with us, and we really appreciate all the partners that are willing to do that. But in terms of current state, if you are doing something relatively simple like the Nest carousel, and you have good, you're not Charles and you can actually do CSS, it actually shouldn't take very long at all. That shouldn't take, a day, whatever. If you start doing more complicated things with, XHRs and API backend things like Google Docs comments, that's obviously a more involved process and will take you longer. And again, the Google Docs comments were one of the, sort of the early stage things. So that one took a long time for the team, but the approving access control one was way faster, because again, it was a robust, non-changing set of standards they were building against, and they'd done it once.
That's a great question. I mean, we have some great use cases that folks are showing. Do you know, are you aware of anybody who's got some samples or from the code side, just so we can see how it's done? Or is there a place we could find that? Is there some open source, so to speak, or some?
I mean, yeah, the Playground has a bunch of samples.
Yeah, it does, but they're normally not as formatted. They're normally more something you can actually learn how to use the AMP components. But I was wondering if there's anything more elaborate or more.
I haven't seen them yet, but my understanding, for those of you, I'll plug myself. I'm giving a talk at MailCon next week with Mark Robbins of Salesforce, and he has a bunch of examples in the deck. And from my understanding, is that they are going to have a whole bunch of examples posted as part of their launch when they officially support this. So, in theory.
One thing I like on the amp.dev site is, I don't know when it popped up, but it was sometime in the past few months. A little bit better section on enterprise use cases and recipes, and so like it's like these 3 components are how you build this experience, right? And it's kind of like breaking it down so that you really get people down a very particular path quickly. And I was playing.
We ultimately do want to build out more of those examples.
Yeah, I mean, and a shout out to that team. That is actually a brilliant piece of documentation in the site, and having the tool up there, the Playground, is amazing. It really is. You mentioned there was no documentation at first, but now they've done a really great job with that. And so again, if you're thinking about that, you're watching this, and you want to learn how to get started, it is pretty interactive, especially with the Playground. So you can go 0 to 60 pretty fast. Again, My hard part is making them completed solutions that look pretty, but again, your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I mean, that's why the stripos, the
with,
dispatches, and
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, the stripos, the dispatches, those people that like have the visual builders make it much easier to send the pretty versions.
Yeah, I still have trouble making mine beautiful. But yeah, I was playing around with because it's such a common use case for. Hey, my camera blanked out. A common use case for the enterprise cases are the workflows, right? Similar to the doc comments. Responding to a ticket, responding to whatever, changing the status on something. So I've been playing around with that, and I just did one from scratch earlier today, and it took about half an hour to get from nothing to a couple cloud functions deployed and a simple email that works, right? I mean, it's ugly, but I was it's like constantly surprised with just like what you can do with very, very little markup. It's about 40 lines of HTML, and I have something that's pretty close to what Google Docs does. Like that's like kind of cool.
Yeah,
that is.
And it's also an excuse to get your design team in and start showing them what's possible, and I'm sure they'll help you with your CSS.
Yeah, if for anybody tuning in, and drop in the comments some use cases or ideas, it would be awesome to get some feedback on it.
Saurabh has one.
Yeah, Saurabh's got a lot. We can't wait to see what we're going to call Saurabh out here. Martin, just obviously, admittedly, you said that you hadn't actually paid much attention to this prior to this show. So first of all, hopefully we're not preaching to the converted. But if you were to go back and build a use case, what have you seen? What have you thought? What kind of inspired you to take this next steps?
Well, for me, I'm kind of strongly in the education sector, so I think it's those kinds of use cases. Anything. It was one of the main reasons I got really interested in AppScript was it removes administration from teaching and learning, and this is what I can see AMP, for email doing. It's removing. Even just a couple of clicks for a teacher is like a couple of clicks and you've got a class. So 30, 300, 3,000, it just multiplies up. So if, I can see huge productivity gains there. Also, I think in terms of user experience, even today we're still dominated by email. So, even my daughter's got an inbox. It's a technology that's not going away. It's supplemented. We use chat and other tools, but still the inbox dominates. So I think that's where I'm interested in coming at this from. I think more people get using it. I think hopefully it will just snowball it, and the good people will just start unpicking how suddenly they're getting interactive emails and start wanting to do it themselves.
Hopefully, that's the goal at least.
Yeah.
If you build it, they will come. And I think again, part of it is I felt it's been pretty much of a best kept secret, just because it wasn't for everybody at first, right? It's obviously the verification process does make it a little harder for the average user to approach, novice developer to approach. But I hope now that people see it or people become aware of it, more people will apply for it. Hopefully, and John, if there's anything you could share here, hopefully we'll make that process a little smoother or easier. Not lowering the bar, but just making the bar easier to get past. For folks.
I was wondering, John, it might be too early, but is anyone offering AMP for email as a service in terms of, essentially, you can start dragging and dropping components in, and it's all already pre-verified for you. So you just need to come to them with the idea, and they can do kind of gory stuff.
I don't think there's anything that's like pre-verified. So multiple use cases coming from the same sending address. That's dangerous for a variety of reasons. you don't want the bad actions of company X affecting your deliverability. So no on the pre-verification part, but yes on the drag and drop and make it easier to create part. And once you have something created that works, like talking through that verification process, registration process, you just have to have a working AMP email, fill out a form on amp.dev. Our teams review it, Yahoo's teams review it, and mail.ru's teams review it. You send a working copy to each email client, and they get back to you with any changes. But usually, if it works, it's not a big deal, and then you're good to go. So it's a barrier, but it shouldn't be too bad if you have a good email.
Is there any cost associated with that?
No.
Perfect.
There's not any cost associated with any of AMP for email.
Awesome.
It's all part of the OpenJS Foundation.
So there's no excuses, is what you're saying.
Exactly. No excuses.
Awesome. Well, I think we're I won't say we're amped out. I think we're amped in. I think we're excited.
Ramped up.
Amped up. There it is.
We're amped up, exactly. So first of all, thank you guys, John and Steve, for sharing, and for everyone for tuning in. With that, anybody else, any last passing words? Steve, John?
I look forward to seeing whatever Saurabh's going to make, or whoever else is on the call.
Yeah, exactly. I want to know what ideas people have come up with from listening, and then if there's something they need, right? It's like, are there more examples or whatever, right? Like I always care about developer experience, and I think AMP is there. It's got a great developer experience right now. But things could always be better. Could always have more samples, more tutorials, more whatever.
Perfect. All right, Martin.
Yeah. So thanks, Steve and John. So we're back here next week, and we're getting to fulfill my edu itch. So we've got an education special next week. So hopefully you'll join us for that. We've got Alice Keeler and Dave from Flubaroo fame.
Exactly.
So we're looking forward to that. I'll learn his surname by then, or unless I put the caption up, Dave of Flubaroo fame.
Dave from Flubaroo.
I believe that's what he did.
all good people coming up. So.
But anyway, thanks for joining in, folks, and thanks for your comments and feedback. We hope you continue enjoying the series again. Thank you to Steve and John. And with that, I will wish you all happy scripting.
Thanks, everybody.